Hey everyone, it's Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. Welcome to episode 42 of the Ginger and the Beard podcast. I'm AJ, aka The Ginger.
And I'm Reese, aka The Beard. And on this week's show, we are joined by John Brennan, founder of MMA Tee Company. Thank you for joining us, John. How's it going?
Thanks for having me, guys. It's going well. I just turned my lights on and noticed that I got a shiner from the gym tonight, and I think that's from a guy we call Old Man Dan, who's a brown belt here at Gracie 717, so I'll have to pay him back for that. But other than that, I'm feeling good. How are you guys?
Good. We're good, man. And it doesn't show up on my end, but I think it's cool that you called it out.
Nice.
Pretty awesome. But yeah, man, we're excited to have you on, and we've been at the podcast grind for a little while, and I think you may have actually started your business pretty close to the same time that we started. So just kind of kick things off, how long have you been up and running with MMA Tee Company?
Yeah, we started just around the time in March, I think, is when we officially launched. So it's myself and my co-founder Alex Einhorn, who I've known for years since we worked in minor league baseball together. And decided to start a business at the height of a pandemic. So we're rolling with it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate timing for sure. And I think we're probably going to get into some of that a little bit later in the show to see how that's kind of impacted your business. But I mean, to kind of kick things off, you mentioned you had the shiner there. So just to kind of clarify for folks, you do actually train MMA and you're a brown belt in BJJ, right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, I've had a total of 10 MMA fights, 9 amateur, and then I had one pro fight. It was 2 years ago, last week, that I lost my MMA debut, my pro debut, and then I've been training jiu-jitsu for 9-ish years. I started in college, and got my brown belt just around the time that I had my pro debut. So I've still in the gym pretty regularly. COVID, took some time off, but I teach classes and, have some pretty loyal students and, enjoy still getting in and mixing it up with the guys on the mats. I haven't been training MMA as much lately. I had my first child was born. My daughter, Lily, was born in May. So since we had her, haven't been on the mats nearly as much as I would like to be, but I would like to get in, more often.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Just to kind of ask a little bit more about your background. Usually people that, get into MMA or BJJ, I find, have, some other athletic background, so I'm just wondering, I kind of know, you're from Lancaster, PA, PA being one of the bigger wrestling states. So I was just kind of curious, do you have a background in wrestling at all?
I wrestled until 3rd grade for the Williams Valley Mat Rats, and then I saw my friends were going out for the basketball team. Joe's Gym is the league that they called it. It's just the local barber who ran an elementary school basketball program. I wanted to play Joe's Gym basketball, so in 4th grade I went out for the basketball team. Didn't really get any taller, never really got good at basketball, and never went back to wrestling. So my athletic background is more in baseball and football, which is what I played all through high school growing up. And then I got into MMA and jiu-jitsu when I was at Shippensburg University, a state school here in Pennsylvania. I was at the gym working out and I saw a flyer that said, "Are you interested in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai? If so, call this number and we'll take you to your first class." So I called the number, show up at this kid's apartment. He stuffs me in the back of his Ford Ranger and we drive 45 minutes to Chambersburg. And that was my introduction into jiu-jitsu. And I just kind of stuck with it and kept training, and about 3 years later I had a kickboxing fight, and then another year and a half or so after that I had my first MMA fight.
Wow, that's like a trust fall into
Yeah.
into BJJ. Get in the back of the car.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, the good news is you didn't get murdered, so that's a win.
And that was my mom's biggest concern. She wanted me to stay on the phone with her the entire time because she was dead set that I was going to get murdered that night.
Wow.
That's awesome. But instead, you just went to get beat up by a bunch of people that knew what they were doing.
Yeah, instead we were just simulating murder in pajamas, which is much different.
That's a good way to put it.
That's awesome.
There's a shirt idea right there if you haven't done it yet. Murder in pajamas.
Exactly. So, well, that's cool, man. I wish I would have gotten, I mean, it's not too late, I guess. I'm only 30. I guess people way older than me have probably gotten into jiu-jitsu or something, but I actually just put my 4-year-old into karate. So they call it karate, but I feel like they do that. The place that we take him does more than just karate, but I think he's probably gone approaching 10 classes now. He likes it a lot. It's pretty cool to watch him learn. So we'll see. I don't know where that will take him. If he'll even be interested in like another 10 classes, he might lose complete interest all of a sudden. But so far, it's going pretty well.
Yeah, I know BJJ is grueling, and I'm sure you put a ton of time and effort in it. To be a brown belt, is a huge achievement. To even get your blue belt is a huge achievement, I think. But to stay at it long enough to get a brown belt, and I'm sure you're going to get a black belt someday. So that's really cool to hear. I did it for a little bit. I was a wrestler all through high school, and I wrestled in college, and then I started doing BJJ as a white belt, and then I went and competed, and I broke my foot, and I was like, I don't know if this is right for me, to be incurring medical bills. So I haven't gone back since, but it was a great experience. I certainly learned a lot. So really cool.
Yeah, I think that's right about the time that you and I met each other, Reese, when your foot was injured. I remember you like hobbling around when you were here visiting us one time.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. I was in a boot at that point.
Yeah. So, well, any major injuries sustained for you, John?
No, that's what I was just about to say. Is I think one of the reasons that I was able to maintain, my constant, mat time is because I didn't sustain any serious injuries. I think the biggest injury that I sustained through my entire time while I was training was actually 2 weeks prior to my pro debut, where I was power washing my house, and I was up on a ladder, and the ladder slid out from under me, and I fell like 12 feet onto my shoulder. So my biggest injury during jiu-jitsu actually didn't come from jiu-jitsu or MMA training at all. Other than that, I've been very fortunate to not get seriously injured. Bumps and bruises and, twisted ankles, or, you're sore for a couple days or a couple weeks, but nothing where I was in a boot or a cast or, any broken bones, anything like that.
That's good. Very fortunate. So I guess, kind of transitioning now, let's get into the company, right? So just jumping straight in, what inspired you to start your company?
It kind of goes back a ways. Alex Einhorn, who I mentioned earlier, is my co-founder. And Alex and I worked for the Lancaster Barnstormers, the minor league baseball team that's up here, for a couple years together. We ran the live events production. So we were in the booth. I was directing the cameras and putting everything up on the scoreboard. And Alex was actually the MC down running around on the field. So we would set up the show and go through that whole production. And Alex was the guy that we called the roof ranger. And he was someone who would go up on the roof, and he would like get all the balls that would, come off the roof, and he'd throw plush balls down into the kids into the stands. Well, I had designed a Roof Ranger t-shirt for Alex that we could sell at games or give away at games, I guess, which was just a outline of his head. I just put his picture into Photoshop and, screen grabbed it, made it black, and that was kind of the first shirt that was designed for MMA Tee Company. Fast forward a couple years, Alex competing in strongman is at Nationals, and I did kind of the same design, but then we actually sold the shirts to friends and family and whatnot. I start fighting MMA. Alex goes off and he starts a t-shirt company. So he started a company that's called Philly Drinkers. And he does like parodies and funny shirts. And, when Jason Kelsey said about hungry dogs in the Super Bowl speech, Alex made a shirt about that with his Mardi Gras garb on and things like that. He did a shirt for me when I fought, and I was like, could we sell my t-shirts through an online store like you sell your Philly Drinkers apparel? He was like, yeah, that's fine, no problem. I'll just put a link to your shirts on Philly Drinkers. We get to talk, and we're like, other fighters would really be interested in not having to carry around a cardboard box full of t-shirts. And we kind of, we're spitballing ideas back and forth, lots of text messages, lots of phone calls while Alex was driving to and from work. And then we were on the phone with a local promoter who I fight for, Mike Bickings, for Art of War. And he was like, you guys should just start a t-shirt company. Call it MMA T-shirts. And we kind of went with it from there in March and, signed some local athletes from my gym, and then started branching out to gyms in Philly and the Delaware area. And now we have, I think we have 45, 46 signed athletes from, I think, 13 different states all over the country, and also have a fighter in Thailand, and I'm working with some people in Brazil and a couple other places to sell shirts.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I didn't realize you guys had like international fighters. That's really cool. So yeah, I mean, we talked about your background and things. So you didn't obviously have a background in t-shirt production before, but it sounds like you may have had a little bit of graphic design experience. So kind of a perfect storm, it sounds like.
Yeah, I had to teach myself Photoshop when I got the job for the baseball team, and I had to design everything that went up on the video board. So spent a lot of nights with dual monitors of a YouTube tutorial on one side, Photoshop open on the other side, and just kind of going through, how to, create graphics in Photoshop. When I left the Barnstormers, Alex was kind of doing the same thing, and my departure kind of thrust him into that role. So he, over the course of time, became a much better graphic designer than I am at this point. So Alex is Alex is the person who comes up with the ideas for the graphics. He does a lot of the graphic work for our athletes, where they'll just send him an idea of like, I like a phoenix with my name and maybe the year that I was born, and Alex will like spit out 4 or 5 different graphics, and then they'll refine 1 or 2 of them, and that becomes the final process.
That's awesome. Yeah,
wow.
we've seen some of the designs on your site, and they're pretty impressive, man. I think you guys are doing a great job. Especially, I like the now of course I'm blanking on it. The general is that well, is the sorry, now I gotta go and look at this. There was one particular one I saw. Yeah, the general for Justin Patton.
Oh yeah, he fights tomorrow. Justin does.
Nice. Yeah, it's like a zombie military general looking design. That thing looks really rad, man.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite designs too. I think I'm gonna eventually have to go ahead and buy a Justin Patton shirt.
Nice. So so you explained that you and Alex kind of put together some templates and then work with the fighter directly. So I'm just wondering, is this one that you just kind of came up with, or did you guys work with him? And is he kind of like the whole zombie thing's kind of like throwing me off? I'm assuming his nickname's the General, but where did like the zombie come from? Is that something that he kind of wanted to throw in?
Yeah, that was kind of through the creative process, just working with Justin. It was something that came up in conversation. He was like, "Oh yeah, that would be sweet. Let's see that." And kind of refined it a few times, and put the finishing touches on it. And he's really happy with the design. I know Alex is really proud of what he came up with. So that's one of the ones that we're all really happy with.
Oh yeah, I could see why. It looks awesome. And I did a little bit of background research, and it looks like you guys are using screen printing, or at least from what I could see. And a shirt like this, I know the viewers can't see it right now, but you guys got to go check it out. MMAtee.com. I'm sorry, MMAteeco.com if you want to look at what we're looking at. But it looks like it has a couple different colors. So do you have anything like intense like this where there's like, I don't know, 10 different colors, or is it usually just kind of 3 or 4 kind of colors just layered together?
Yeah, for the screen printing specifically, Alex always does mention to the fighters, we'll go up to 3 colors typically. So the shirt color plays into that. So that one might have 4 total colors that it looks like, but it's the shirt color and then 3 colors of ink. But we did just acquire a DTG printer, so direct to garment. So not only will we be able to screen print in-house, but we'll be able to DTG, one-off items or, flags, drawstring bags, different things like that. And we don't have to do a run of 25, 30, 40 shirts for a fighter for a specific fight. And that's where their online stores kind of come into play. So their designs stay up all year long, and anybody can buy a shirt at any time off of our website.
Oh wow! So it's kind of just like fulfillment per order with the DTG. I've never actually heard of DTG. My wife uses the Cricut, and she has a heat press and whatnot. We don't really have space for the screen printing, but I've seen it done before, and it's fascinating process. So DTG, you can just kind of save the templates and then load a shirt in, and it just takes care of the rest for you. Is it like a laser?
Yeah, it's just pretty much it's like a Cricut on steroids. Is the way that I would explain it, where it just digitally prints the ink onto the shirt. So you need an ink cartridge, you need things like that. And we have some videos that Alex has been posting from the warehouse where you can actually see the printer going back and forth, and it's just one layer at a time of just, going across the shirt. It's actually really impressive.
And I'm assuming the quality goes up significantly too, because the ink that you're using probably sticks to the fibers a lot better. You don't have the peeling, or after like 20 washes you kind of lose a lot, right? So cool. That's awesome that you guys are able to make that investment. Sounds like going on the right path there.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited now that we have everything kind of where we want it to be in downtown Lancaster. So, we're now truly a local business where we aren't going to have to outsource really anything.
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I kind of want to go to like the fighter side of things. I mean, obviously you mentioned you had I think you said 36 fighters now. And yeah, we've been following you guys on Instagram for quite a while, and it seems like you got a new fighter announcement like 2 times a week. You guys are rolling through them, so it's pretty cool. So how do you? I'm curious, like, what's the process for finding fighters to sponsor? I know you said when you first started, you picked up a couple of guys from your gym that you train at, but obviously we live in weird times, and travel and events are all sort of, a little bit different than they used to be. So do you rely pretty heavily on the internet to find people that you're looking to sponsor, or do you have fighters reaching out to you? I'm curious how that process works.
It's both. We do have a section on our website where anyone can submit to be a sponsored athlete. So there's a couple things that we look at in terms of criteria. I try to find any video that I can on anyone that submits. I'll usually reply to them actually via email and be like, can you send me YouTube links? I'll look at their Tapology page and see, what their record is, who they fought. And then also just kind of have a back and forth conversation of, what their goals are and what kind of following they have. Not that that's really that important at the regional level, but I just like to know that, our athletes are, taking it seriously, and they're not just kind of showing up kind of half-assed. And they, people that want to do well in this sport typically find, through one way or another, a very large following, whether they're trying to or not. Just because most people that they're close to will see how much time they put into it. So the amount of time that you put in, I think, directly correlates into the amount of people that will eventually follow you and want you to succeed. So that, I think, is a big factor as well. So when people reach out, that's kind of the things that we look at. And then when I'm reaching out to people, I started with just honestly going to the different states in Tapology and going through the top 100 fighters and researching each one and being like, okay, this is someone I want to work with. And then I would drag and drop their name into a spreadsheet. And then Alex and I would just run it like, any business that, you have a sales team. And I would be the person that was running sales for us. And I'd, reach out, I'd market that I reached out on this date. And then if they didn't get back to me, I'd reach out again. And we ran our entire business through Instagram. As true, millennials would. It's, pretty much just Instagram DMs. Here's a sample of a store that we made for someone. Here's what we can offer you. Here's what we're looking at from you. Would you like to work together? And then the conversation kind of goes from there.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, seems like a really smart approach to me. You guys built yourself your own little CRM system in a spreadsheet. That's really cool.
Yeah. We've transferred up to the big boys. We use HubSpot now, so
nice.
We're actually in a CRM and running it the way that it should be running it. It's much more efficient for everyone involved.
Very cool, man. So I mean, would you be able to kind of just divulge a little bit on like what's the relationship between you and the fighter? Like, what do you guys? Obviously, I'm in marketing, so I kind of understand like the relationship a little bit, but you guys get exposure by being represented through the different fight, the regional events and things like that. But what is the fighter getting out of the relationship with you guys? Is it, besides just having this awesome, I mean, number one, these awesome logos created for them, but is that theirs to keep forever once you guys design it for them? Can they use it wherever they like, even if they're not working for you anymore? And I guess, just expanding on that.
Yeah. I mean, when I originally reach out to someone, going back, I noticed that everybody's first question was, how much will this cost? Right? Fighters are so used to saying, I need 100 shirts. And then the screen printer says, all right, you're going to need to pay me $750. And then the fighter is out that money until they sell the shirts for whatever they sell them for.
Right.
And we've never taken $1 from a fighter. except for any fighters who want to put that bulk order in, like put in a wholesale order for themselves. So we don't ask for any money up front. We pay every fighter for every piece of merchandise that they sell, whether it's a hat, a t-shirt, a long sleeve shirt, a sweatshirt. We have margins built in, and the fighter gets paid more than we get paid for everything that we sell. So they're getting paid out every Sunday by us. On top of that, we're also quickly realizing, and have realized in the past couple of months, that while we are a merchandise company, we have the legs to be a very powerful branding machine for these regional fighters, in the sense that we're creating them custom graphics for their shirts. We're creating them social media content all the time, right? We have a very strict social media calendar where we do in the wilds of their fans wearing the shirts, and we do, pictures with them for upcoming fights, and we do, like you've seen, interviews with them. So not only are they getting the exposure through those social media graphics, but they're also then getting real world experience in terms of interviews that they can take and refine how they act and operate on camera, so that when they move up through the ranks, their first interview, on camera isn't at a Bellator event or isn't at, a UFC, that they've been comfortable on camera 5, 6, 7, 8 times with me to know what their persona is going to be when they're on camera, whether it is truly who they are or if they want to be like a Conor McGregor. And it's not my job to tell them one way or the other. It's for them to figure that out, but we give them the tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that, obviously Reese and I talk primarily about UFC on our show, and that's primarily what we follow. But that's some of the stuff you don't really think about when you see these guys on TV. Obviously, I mean, Reese, you and I have talked at length about how this works, how this world works, and you've got to have the personality, you've got to have the hype behind you to get some of the bigger fights. You got to be the biggest shit talker in the room sometimes. So you don't think about that kind of stuff, about developing your brand and your persona. You got like Colby Covington and Conor McGregor and Chael Sonnen and all these guys that have built up those reputations. But that's probably something they practiced and actually honed in on. They didn't just like come out like that one day, So that's really cool.
Some of them just have a knack for it. Like you can't really train what Conor does. That's kind of just nature, I feel like. And then you have Colby on the other hand, where it seems like very forced. But at the same token, it's like you can learn from Colby things not to do, probably. And I think there's so much value in what you just described to us, John, for these fighters, and just kind of training them, making the brands for them. But through those interviews, you make fans, right? So if they know what they're doing when the light's on them finally, and they can talk and not be nervous, and all that fun stuff, then it's probably going to turn into some, they're going to turn some fans, during some interviews. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and for every fighter that we sign, we gain, an exponential number of followers on our own page. And, our fighters, they each have their own audience, but we're, almost as a byproduct, building our own following without focusing so much on going out and reaching potential clients of our own. Because for each fighter, like I said, they bring in their own following and our numbers grow. So it's not like we're, out there having to run targeted ads at MMA fans or at, 20 to 35-year-old men who watch UFC. None of that plays into our marketing plan. It all comes back to how much content can we put out for these fighters to make sure that their brands are seen by the most amount of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Revolving door, I feel like, on that one.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and I'm speaking for myself here. I think, Reese, you've been watching MMA and UFC for longer than I have, but I haven't had much exposure, honestly, outside of UFC, maybe a little bit of Bellator, a little bit of ONE FC, stuff like that. But the regional scene, we had the guys from the Beers and Beards podcast on not too long ago, and David McKinney and Gary have also spent some time like commentating on regional events. So yeah, I'd like to get. Well, obviously right now is kind of a hard time, so I think we should talk about that as well. Like COVID obviously has kind of put the kibosh on regional and local events. Here in Virginia Beach, there's an arena in Norfolk close by that they used to hold I can't think of the actual promotion name right now, but hold local events. I have never made it out to any before, but that's definitely something I'd like to do moving forward, is like actually start to support and go and watch some of these up and coming fighters, because you never know, they might work their way up and like you said, debut with Bellator or UFC. Everybody starts somewhere, right? So that's definitely something I'd like to get more into in the future whenever the apocalypse comes to a conclusion.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, go ahead, John.
oh, sorry, I was just going to say one of the taglines that we use is, every world champion, started as a regional fighter, and it's important to support those regional fighters from that early stage. Whether you're a fan of just MMA or a fan of that one person, I think you'd be really surprised at how unique a regional show is, from just two guys that just want to fight, and they probably haven't been in the gym more than 6 times in the last 6 weeks, but they still took the fight, and they both gas in the first minute, and then it's just a slugfest, to someone who you're watching them fight, and they might have 5 or 6 amateur fights, and you're like, that dude's on another level. Like, you can definitely tell early on about that 5-6 fight mark in amateurs who has the potential to possibly make it to that next level, and then the level above that.
Are there any resources that you could like point us to, or point the viewers to, or listeners, to help them find regional circuits, or anything amateur in their area? Is there any kind of like resource that does that, or do you just kind of have to get on Google and just figure it out?
The one that I've used in the past is, if you just go to literally mixedmartialarts.com, there's a section in there where you can search for events, and you can search by state, and it will show you regional events that are coming to your state. Now, I'm not sure if all of them are listed. I know in Pennsylvania, Greg Serb, who's our commissioner, once you register with him, I think it goes on to mixedmartialarts.com automatically, if I'm not mistaken. So most of the Pennsylvania fights, if not all of them, will be on there, but I can't say the same for other states because I just haven't had the experience with them.
Got it. I just popped in my head, but like, the regional circuits, like, this is all regulated. It sounds like, you have to sign up, and there's probably some level of approval, where they're taking some part of your information. And then the complete opposite of that is like street fighting on YouTube, where you see 2 guys in the backyard just in jeans just fighting it out. I mean, what are your thoughts on like the 2 different areas there? Are you against street fighting in any way, and more pro, hey, be safer, sign up and get the protection with an actual referee? Just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was never in a fight until it was my first kickboxing fight. Never got into fights as a kid. I did beat up Michael Motter one time, a kid that my mom babysat, I think because he was bullying my sister, but that doesn't count because I was like 7 or 8.
That counts.
She always likes to bring that up, at different family gatherings and stuff. But other than that, to each their own. I attended a bunch of backyard brawls and playground fights, and I watched Dave Ewells beat up Josh Dehan at the old school in Williamstown, so that was kind of fun. Things like that as your kids. It is what it is. 2 grown men, if they're going to fight, if they're in their 30s and they want to, fight in the street, just join a gym and, I think fight, in a cage with a referee. I don't think there's any reason for 2, adults to fight each other, outside of a bar or what have you. But, kids are going to be kids, that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it worked out for Jorge Masvidal.
It did.
And Kimbo.
Kimbo Slice.
And Kimbo,
yep. Yeah, and shout out to Kahim Murray, who just beat Baby Slice in Bellator. Kahim is, a pretty good regional fighter from the area. Just put on a good show in Bellator, fighting out of Royal Striking down there in Philly. So, props to Kahim. He fought a great fight.
Nice.
Awesome.
I'll have to do a shout out for that.
Some of this stuff is just so brutal, man. Like, even being a huge MMA UFC fan, like the bare knuckle boxing stuff is just so hard to watch, and the backyard stuff too is just like, it's just too much. I agree with you. I think put that effort into an actual gym, but I guess like a barrier to entry for some people is the cost that some gyms require to come and train. There's some limitations there for sure, but
kind of going off of that real quick, AJ, I know that a lot of gyms, if there is a cost issue and you're really dedicated, you can go ask them, hey, can I come mop the floors? Do you need something painted? Do you need something washed? Whatever. They'll usually bend over backwards if you really are that dedicated. So,
yeah,
I think that's really cool. I'm going to actually use that to kind of dovetail and talk about real quick. We've talked a lot about bare knuckle fighting, and what's that girl's name that just left the UFC to go over there? Paige Van Zant, right? And she got offered a ton of money, and I'm like really working around on this, but UFC fighters, MMA fighters in general, don't make a lot of money, and they took away all of like the sponsorship when they brought in Reebok. So all of that money's gone. But you see people finding ways, right? And I think that's kind of what is like the best selling point for the MMA Tee Company, is it's not one of these like crazy promotions like Invicta or what was the other one? What was the other big one back in the day, like back in 2008 or whatever? Tap Out. Yeah, it was Tap Out. That was like everywhere. So that's not around anymore. So do you feel like having companies like the MMA Tee Company are helping to fill that void, or have the potential to help fill that void for not only just amateur fighters, but pro level fighters at some point?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that we decided to give the fighters a higher percentage than we even make is one, it forces us to scale, right? If we have 1,000 fighters, then we're doing well, and every fighter is doing well. If we only have 10, the fighters are still doing well and we're not. So it forces us to hustle, right? Sign the best fighters, bring people on, things like that. But the other side of it is that regional fighters don't make a whole lot of money. I mean, I was on the high end of a pro debut, and I got $650 to show, $650 to make weight, and then if I would have won, I would have got another $650, and that's on the higher end for most Pennsylvania, regional fighters to make that pro debut. So you don't make a whole lot of money just fighting. Now, I made more money in sponsorships and T-shirt sales, obviously, than I made in fighting. So it's those local businesses that really support those fighters coming up through, and you can still get sponsored, right? Go as a UFC fighter. You just can't wear the logo on your shorts. You have to be more creative, which is why Paige Van Zant did so well not fighting very often, was because her Instagram made her so much money, because she would do sponsored content and she would be a brand ambassador and she would do things like that. And we have, we're really excited for the Paige Van Zant fight. She's fighting Britain Hart, and, we have some exciting news that's going to be coming out, in the next couple of weeks about that fight as well.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
okay.
nice.
I have to keep
Nice
our
little
ears
teaser
open.
there.
That's exciting.
Yeah, our thing with Paige Van Zant, and I was just talking to my wife about this the other day, it's like, oh man, it's just to go, and that's just like, these are like little blades on your fists. These little knuckles are like little blades. They'll just cut your face open. It's just so brutal. But
right.
Yeah.
And her being
I guess
Instagram model, right? Like seems like a lot of risk, but I know she's doing more than just fighting for bare knuckle fighting. So I know she's going to be like commentating and doing some other things too. So
yeah, and the funny thing is about bare knuckle is that most people that go out and swing for the fences will break their hands. Like you can come out and you can throw bombs with MMA gloves on. They're only 4 ounces, and you can really crack someone and your hands feel fine. But take those gloves off and just throw a little tape on there, and hit somebody in the temple, your knuckles are going to shatter. So
Jeez.
I think as people start fighting bare knuckle more often, not that it's not going to be as bloody as it is, but I think you're going to see more tactical fights, less haymakers, because people aren't going to want to break their hands and be out for 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever it may be. But it's still in its infancy, right? BKFC has only had, a handful, a dozen fights maybe. And Dave Feldman, who runs BKFC, he's actually the first person I fought MMA for way back in like 2014. He used to run a promotion up here in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of funny, not funny, funny watching, him go from MMA into bare knuckle, and now it's become this like worldwide sensation. And, I used to hang out with him backstage before fights.
That's cool, man. It's good to have connections.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
That's awesome. So, we talked a little bit about the regional fight scene, and we talked about COVID. So obviously being as involved as you are, with that level of fighting, how has COVID impacted that on, like, what have you seen firsthand? Is like, have all events been shut down? Obviously, we know UFC. There's still no fans in the stands. Have there been any regional or local fights that are like officially sanctioned since the shutdown?
There have most of the regional cards up our way anyway that have been put on are CFFC, which is Cage Fury Fighting Championships, and they have a UFC Fight Pass deal. So they've been able to still put on regional shows, showcase regional talent, and just, not really have fans. Now, I think they have like 200 max or 250 max, and they all have to sit at a table, different people at different tables, things like that. But it seems as you go south, there's kind of less and less restriction on who you can have in the venue and where they can sit and how many fighters can be on the card. So I know one of our athletes, Tyler Jones, just did a combat jiu-jitsu fight down in Florida. And I'm pretty sure, there were fans, and they did back-to-back shows on the same day where they packed the place, kicked everyone out, packed the place again, all within like 12 hours. So it really is, when you say regional, it really is region to region on if they're having fights. Now, here in Pennsylvania, the thing that I've noticed the most is, like, we have really good amateur fighter Christian Carr, who just hasn't been able to really fight because all of these regional shows are pretty much just putting on pros, right? There are not a whole lot of amateurs fighting. So at some point, there's going to be a gap where all of the amateurs had to stop fighting and all of the pros kept getting better. And there's just going to be this large gray area where there was no experience for however many months this is going to last. And it's going to be very interesting to see who advances, who just never fights again, and kind of what all conspires. And we just don't know at this point.
Yeah, it's got to be a tough thing. Obviously, this COVID has impacted a lot of different areas of life for everyone, but for somebody who trains and you rely on these events as your income, or at least supplemental income if you're not, that high level yet, and really just the passion too. I mean, these guys who are coming up in this sport, this is like their livelihood. Like they do this because they love it. That's what they've grown up doing. So, I mean, number one, I guess a lot of gyms at first probably even shut down. But so, I mean, hopefully at least they can train and continue to hone their craft. But, to not be able to put on performances is probably pretty frustrating, and obviously puts a little bit of a damper on their advancement in the sport and things like that. But I'm curious, like, is anybody that you guys have sponsored, like, do you have, I mean, if you can tell us, is there anybody moving up into some of the more national level promotions, maybe Bellator or things of the sort? Anybody that is kind of on that brink of breaking through?
We have some fighters who, Ethan Goss, for instance, has fought for Bellator, but his next fight is actually this Saturday for a more regional promotion, 247 Fighting Championships. But against another stud. He's fighting another guy named Ethan. I can't think of his last name, but it's things like that where we might have somebody who fought a Bellator fight here and there, or we have a lot of fighters who fight for that CFFC that I mentioned earlier, who you win a belt there and you're getting the call to Bellator, UFC, 1FC, one of those promotions. So the fighters that we do have, I'm pretty thorough with kind of going through and seeing what their potential looks like. And I'm pretty confident that within the next 3 to 4 years, we'll have a decent amount of fighters on UFC and Bellator rosters.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. It'd be really cool to see your logo out there on TV.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So beyond the fighters, you have some really good designs for your original designs. A couple that I think are really cool, certainly Strangle Things, Diet Choke, Sprawl, are all really cool. I'm just wondering if you're going to keep adding to this list here.
Yeah, it's on our quarter one of next year, is to add some more custom designs or original designs, whatever you want to call them. We partnered with a local, well, they're local to me, but they're a national publication, My MMA News. So we're going to have a My MMA News section where a lot of those original designs are going to go, and we're going to do more things that are based on things that UFC fighters might say or do, or Bellator fighters. So it'll be more along the lines of like it'll be hot for 2 or 3 weeks. It's as the thing that happens right away. Designs like that. So that's something that we're also going to be moving into.
You guys should have made a Derek Lewis shirt that says "My balls are hot" or something like that.
Had we been around at the time, we would have had that shirt.
I don't know if any phrase has been coined more than that of late.
Yeah,
that was a good one. So, I mean, I guess speaking of UFC, I mean, obviously your time, you just had a new baby, you're running a company, you just opened a warehouse, you guys are bringing on new fighters. If you have any spare time, do you watch UFC? Can you keep up with UFC or Bellator or things of the like?
Honestly, I watch fights that are fights of people that I'm a fan of or I like their style, but it's very rare that I'm able to now just sit down like I used to and be like, all right, it's 6:30 or whatever it is, prelims are on, and I'm just going to watch this thing until 2 a.m. when the main event happens. Like this past weekend, a training partner of mine, Dustin Stoltz-Foos, fought his UFC debut against a Philly guy, Kyle Dawkins. So my wife and I were sitting at the kitchen table. I just grabbed my laptop, threw it on the table, pulled it up, and watched that specific fight. But then we went back to doing what we were doing. So it's more things like that now. Like I said, if it is somebody that I'm a fan of, somebody that I've been following for a while, I'll make a point to watch them.
Yeah, it's even hard for us sometimes. I think Reese and I both, obviously we've got pretty busy, hectic lives. And, honestly, it's a good thing. I'm not complaining about it. The UFC with the coronavirus, we had that pause at the beginning of the year where there was no fights. But then ever since then, I think they've missed maybe like 2 weekends. There's been a break like 2 weekends, but otherwise it's just back-to-back fights. It's hard for us to keep up, especially with some of the prelim fights and early prelims, which it's kind of like, it's fun to watch those fights because they're, they are the up-and-comer guys, people making their debuts. It's fun to see that kind of rising talent. But, I mean, it's even hard for us to kind of keep up with even the main pay-per-view events. I don't think I actually didn't even watch this weekend's past fight with Davis and Figueiredo. But one thing we want to talk to you about is, like, are there any, like, most memorable moments for you in UFC or even just in MMA in general, like most memorable fights or fighters that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, my all-time favorite fight, even though one of my favorite fighters lost, is Gastelum and Adesanya. And I'm a fan of Gastelum because he has the same exact style that I have. He's short, he's stocky, he's got a big, heavy left hand. And, he's a really good grappler. And that's kind of what I aspire to be as a fighter as well. So to watch him go out there and, put on a real show against who I think is arguably one of the best fighters in the world, and Adesanya, right? Probably up there, top 2, top 3, him, John Jones, and Khabib, I would say, are maybe the top 3 out there doing it right now. Whether Khabib retired or not, nobody knows. But, to watch him go out there and put on a show and do what he did was, really inspiring for me because I think a lot of people wrote him off before that fight.
Yeah, it's hilarious you said that because before the show, before we jumped on with you, Reese and I were talking like, dude, could you even pick like a favorite fight of all time?
And then I was like, yeah, I think right now probably Izzy and Gastelum's like the first one that comes to mind. And AJ's like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah,
that's hilarious, dude.
And then my second favorite would be, and it has to do one with the setting where I watch it, which was at our family cabin with my dad, but then just because it was a badass fight, and that was Rory McDonald and Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, absolutely. AJ, I don't know if you remember that one. I don't know if you were really watching at that time, but
I love Robbie Lawler, but I don't know if I've seen that fight. Maybe I did.
Going into the last round, it was like a bloodbath basically, and they're just kind of staring at each other.
They both look like zombies. They look like the Justin Patton shirt.
Yeah. And they just weren't ready to leave basically going into that last round. They were like, I'm not giving any ground. That was such an awesome fight. So much blood. I think Robbie Lawler broke Rory's nose at one point, and then soon after that it was it ended.
He broke his nose, and then the next time he touched him, Rory just kind of crumbled, and I couldn't imagine the kind of pain that he was in to bring him down. I mean, he's one of the toughest guys in the world, and he dropped.
Yeah. A very similar fight. One of my most memorable is Dan Hooker versus oh geez, I should have even said it because I can't remember his name right now. I can't think of it. I'll have to come back to it.
It was a recent one, right? I think
It was
were
a couple
telling
years
me
ago. Yeah, it's one of the ones I always talk about. Hold on, I got the internet in front of me.
You'll have to bring it up. The John Jones versus Gustafson, the first fight that they had, was another one that I thought was, I don't know if I'd rank it like, it's just one that's like really memorable for me to see John Jones like more. Actually, I think I was more proud of Gustafson for that one, really, to come out and make Jones look like a human for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like Jones, I don't know. This is probably controversial, but I feel like there's probably like 3 or 4 fights that could have went either way. And he probably just got, I don't know if you want to call it luck or not, because he's certainly very skilled, but I just feel like, man, it was just right on the fence. And if the wind would have blew a different way, then, he wouldn't be as, great as he's known as today. So,
yeah. It was Edson Barboza. Jeez, total brain fart. But if you want to know what Dan Hooker's made of, watch that fight, because that dude stood in that. I don't know how he absorbed so much damage, but eventually went out on some liver shots. One of the few fights I've seen where people go out on liver shots. But yeah, that was a crazy fight. But yeah, I agree with you about John Jones. What are your thoughts, John, on John Jones moving up to heavyweight?
Have you seen pictures of him walking around at 245? He's humongous.
He's a monster.
He's a terrifying human being.
He's now 240 pounds, and he's chasing people with shotguns. And
he's a wild card. And that's, I think, partially what makes him so good is that he does have a screw loose, right? Once he's locked in the cage with you, he's trying to murder you, right? There's some people that are out there, and I fall into this trap, who fight MMA as a sport. And then there's people who are out there, like the opponent that I fought in my pro debut, Will Dill, who they're out there to literally kill you. And the only person that's going to stop that from happening is you, right? Killing them first, or the referee pulling them off of you, or you off of them. And when you can kind of couple the sheer athleticism that John Jones has with that screw loose mentality, but his ability to harness it, right, and weaponize it, it's just a scary human being. Whether he's on steroids or not, nobody's ever going to know, right? That's fine.
What you just said reminded me of the Mike Tyson quote. I can't quote it exactly, but when he was talking about when he would go in the ring, he would stare his opponents down and he wouldn't break eye contact with them. And as soon as he saw them break eye contact, he knew they were broken, and then they were dead at that point. And he always went out there trying to kill somebody. And so, yeah, makes sense to have that kind of mindset. Gives you like a little bit of an edge, maybe.
Man, I can't wait to watch the Roy Jones Jr. fight between Mike Tyson. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, no knockouts allowed, though.
Yeah, I saw some. I didn't read much into that. I saw the headline on that. Like, what's the deal with that?
It's just like, because it's essentially a celebrity boxing match, they're not supposed to go for knockouts. Now, good luck telling Mike Tyson not to knock somebody out. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, are they going to fine him with his, whatever money he doesn't have left that, got taken from him? I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, is it like slap boxing or something? Like, what is?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. If they're going to come out and bare knuckle box, we'll see, I guess.
You're only allowed to punch your opponent in the chest. That's it.
Yeah, liver shots only. Liver shots only.
Yeah, that's so weird. But yeah, I mean, I guess like one of the things that I love most about MMA, and I think Reese, you and I are obviously on the same page, is like the sportsmanship of it. You mentioned that, like, going into fighting as a sport. As somebody who does not train MMA and has never fought anybody ever really besides my brother, that's one of the things I appreciate most about the sport, and it was on full display recently with Uriah Hall versus Anderson Silva, where the two guys are like literally in tears, hugging each other, thanking each other, just showing their appreciation and gratitude for even sharing the octagon with each other. And just like, it like almost brought a tear to my eye, like no joke. It's like the most heartwarming thing you see when you got these two guys, no matter who it is, it doesn't have to be those two guys, just battling it out in the octagon, going for broke, trying to knock each other out. But at the end of the fight, man, they are showing respect for each other. And for people who don't watch MMA, whether it's UFC or whatever promotion it is, they don't understand. They're like, oh, these people, this is so brutal. This is such a barbaric sport. But like, if you, it is a sport. The fact that it's a sport and these people are training day in and day out, for an entire year in some cases or longer before they, actually fight someone. And then they are showing their gratitude towards each other at the end of the fight. As a fighter yourself, how much does that actually hold true for you? How much have you actually witnessed that on your own?
I mean, I think it's a really big part of it. I always had a lot of gratitude for all of my opponents just for being able to share the cage with them. I always wanted the best possible opponent out of who I was fighting at the time. Just because I didn't want to put all of that work in, right? It consumed my life when I would have a fight coming up. So I didn't want to put all of that work in and then, come out and have somebody that didn't really put a camp together. And then, not that it would be a waste of time for me because I would get a win, but would I really have been tested? Would I really have improved? All of those different things. So I always would thank my opponents for taking the fights. I didn't look at it as a fight as much once I got into the sport. And I think that kind of hurt me in a ways because I would need to get cracked, every fight I would get cracked and, I got dropped a couple fights. So I was like, oh shit, like I'm going to fight. And, walk into the cage, my last couple fights, I, walked out to some happier music and, I'm all smiles. I couldn't do the Mike Tyson thing, like staring people down because I'm just very happy. Like I put in all this work, spent time away from my family, missing, whatever events it may be. And then, you put all that time in hours and hours and hours in the gym and at max as a pro, you're fighting 15 minutes on the regional scene unless you have, a title fight and then you're fighting 25 minutes. So, that's a third to a quarter of one training session on one day of an 8-week camp. And it just, when you think about how much time gets put into what you actually get to do in terms of showing the skills that you built over the last 6, 8, 10 weeks, it can become overwhelming. And that is something else that, might have been hitting Uriah Hall or Anderson Silva is, Uriah Hall grew up watching Anderson Silva and he came up through the sport and Anderson Silva was like untouchable. And then to share the cage with that, guy across from you and to kind of drop him in the same way that he's dropped so many people in the past, Uriah Hall kind of was, I think, just taken aback by how he's now come full circle.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what me and Reese talked about was, it's what, I mean, that's the epitome of a bittersweet moment right there. Somebody you've idolized for so long. You just knocked out, you just TKO'd, right? So you feel terrible for finishing them in their last fight in the UFC, but also like so excited that you just won that fight and also grateful at the same time for even having that experience. So yeah, it's just that right there that like, I have people, that I work with or whoever that I talk to that is like, oh yeah, I can't watch UFC. It's too brutal for me. It's just like, but if you look at it from the sportsmanship side of it, just don't pay attention to the shit talking, to the blood, all that stuff. It's just like, just watch the end of the fights and how much respect these guys have for each other, minus a few specific people, who are just like bad blood sort of guys. It's just it's an awesome sport to watch and to see, what people can accomplish.
Yeah. And I would say to all of the stand 'em up guys at the bar, right? They're just screaming when there's grappling going on, stand 'em up, stand 'em up, stand 'em up. Find a friend of yours, right, that trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, or MMA, and just have them talk to you about the details that are happening during the fight while they're on the ground. It will really open your eyes as to how beautiful of a sport mixed martial arts really is when you realize how difficult ground fighting actually is. To hold someone down who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt or brown belt or purple belt for that fact, right? To hold them on the ground and beat them up is a very, very hard thing to do. And people come through the gym all the time and they think that, they're a tough guy or that they're a good fighter or what have you. And our gym enforcer is a 135-pound purple belt. Josh, go get him. And, Josh is beating up 230, 240-pound dudes on the ground because it's just people move differently. It's not something that you can just pick up in a day. And to see it play out in real life and to see somebody neutralize somebody else's game or somebody who's a prolific striker that is able to, stop takedowns and, things like that, it's what makes the sport what it is. It's truly mixed martial arts, and it's this guy has this skill set, this guy has this skill set, and who's going to be, the better fighter that day.
Absolutely. It's a chess match basically every time, you're rolling with somebody. And, I agree. They shouldn't be standing them up, but it's a profit seeking business. So I can understand why they do that. I'm sure the refs are told, hey, let's try and keep the action moving. But, if you go and actually watch like an MMA tournament, it's a different story. And I know from personal experience, just like all of the different ways that you can apply pressure to somebody's body to hold them down. It's really eye-opening. You could have somebody that only weighs, like, let's say for Khabib, for instance, who only weighs 155 pounds. I think he's certainly mastered how to use every little bit of his body weight to make it feel like you have a 250-pound man, riding on your back or whatever it is. So there's so much technique in that. And I think a lot of like your typical MMA fans probably overlook that. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, exactly. And to be honest, like transparent, before we started the show and I started to really pay attention to UFC at a different level, I was one of those people who was like, man, I want to see the action. I want to see some blood. I want to see some knockouts, right? But now the more that you pay attention to it and listen, that's why I love when like you have like Dominic Cruz commentating on a UFC fight, because that guy can see a setup coming a mile away. He's like, okay, now he's going to pass. He's going to pass guard here. He's going to try to take control, whatever. Or he's got to control the left wrist to do this. And like, he explains it as you're watching it. So if you're somebody like me who's never trained and you don't know what's happening, you can actually start to look for it. And then, yeah, you've got the people in the stands. Obviously, yeah, I mean, it's entertainment value. People are drunk in the audience and they're screaming out like boo whenever they stay on the ground for more than 10 seconds. So I get that. But yeah, like once you actually have a deeper appreciation, obviously you, John, as a fighter and somebody who's trained jiu-jitsu, you clearly know what's happening and have a whole another level of appreciation when watching it. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think people should take a second look and, see what's actually happening there. And same thing with the clinch too. Like they break apart the clinch a lot when people are trying to set different things up. Same situation though. They're looking for the action. But
I have one more question, and I think just another topic is like watching footwork. Right, that's like a whole nother thing where you could probably watch a whole fight just like looking at somebody's feet just to see what they're doing. It's like a whole nother game. But you mentioned earlier how there's like really only ever 15 minutes or at max like 25 minutes to showcase all of the work that you've done. And I know I think in some jiu-jitsu tournaments, like they can go for like 30 minutes, or even like Pride used to have like 30 minutes, right? I mean, I definitely see some value in doing that and maybe even like having longer fights if at all possible. Do you think that that's something that probably should be implemented in another different fighting championship or fighting promotion, where they should have like a promotion that does 60-minute fights,
I mean, me personally, my fight style and the way that I train to fight is I would love one 60-minute round, right? Just let's go, me and you, and we'll see what happens. But I know one for a matchmaker, right? That becomes, if you have 10 fights on a card, that's a 600-minute day. That's a long day to put on a promotion. So the logistics of it are kind of difficult. And in the other side of things, right, it's not a very fan-friendly fight where we could spend 10 minutes that I'm just kind of holding you down and making you tired and grinding you out because I know that my gas tank's better than yours. So that's the other part of it. But me personally, yeah, I'll, put me on the 50-yard line of a football field, no cage, and let's just, do it for 60 minutes and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like it's more, akin to like life and death kind of stuff too, right? Because you're not going to be in like 5 minute rounds where you get to take a break. Like if you're fighting for your life, like in, let's say it was like 500 years ago or something, you were fighting for your life.
Gladiators.
Yeah, gladiators. There's no breaks, right? So it's kind of like you really get to see what people are made of, doing it that way. I mean, UFC in general, you're going to find, or MMA in general, you're going to figure out what you're made of. But yeah, I like that idea.
I know Joe Rogan would be a fan of it, but I mean, he's going to have to start his own Spotify fighting championship, so we'll see if that happens.
You never know, man. He's starting his own comedy club in Texas.
True, yeah. He might just have a whole compound down there by 2030.
Yeah, Joe Rogan for governor. I'm a huge Joe Rogan fan. I was listening to his podcast today, actually. So
I just saw he put one up with Dave Chappelle, so I'm going to listen to that tomorrow.
Yeah. Dave Chappelle doesn't actually come into like the 3-hour mark, so you might want to skip ahead if you want.
Good to know. I didn't see him on the preview, and I was like, well, he might come in later, so I'll skip ahead.
Yeah, but the other, I'm blanking on the other guy's name right now.
Burris?
He's also,
was it Burris? Is that how you say it?
I can't remember.
Jeez,
I have to look it up.
Man, my memory is
He's
so
funny
terrible.
too. I think it's Burris, but I can't remember.
Yeah, you're right. It's Hannibal Buress.
Hannibal
Buress.
Okay.
There it is.
That dude is hilarious, man. That episode in general is hilarious. But yeah, so I think that about wraps it up, man. We've talked about a lot here. For anybody listening, obviously, thank you, number one, for listening. And make sure you check out MMATeeco.com. That's MMATeeco.com. If you're not watching the YouTube video, John's wearing an MMA t-shirt right now. They've got a ton of awesome designs on the site. Obviously, each of the fighters have their own special designs. A lot of them are really cool. There's one I'm looking at right now. It's Dill Pickle, which is Dylan Harnish, his shirt. And one we mentioned earlier is for Justin Patton, the General. That's an awesome design right at the top of the site there. So check that out. But also, like Reese mentioned earlier in the show, check out the original designs, because there's a lot of stuff in there that, number one, just super funny. So kudos to you guys for coming up with some of that stuff. Netflix and Spar, Strangle Things instead of Stranger Things, Diet Choke, Sprawl instead of Sprite. All that stuff's really cool. Chokin instead of Dunkin' for Dunkin' Donuts. A lot of it's really cool. So definitely check them out. And I guess other than that, make sure you support your regional fighters, man. Something that I think Reese and I both want to get more into once we can actually go out into the world and enjoy live events again. But John, anything else you want to plug before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. Other than that, we're going to be doing some Black Friday to Cyber Monday sales. We're releasing, a signature item for each one of our athletes. So check them out. We'll be releasing them on social over the weekend. And like you said, just go out and support your regional fighters. If you can't get to a show anytime soon, support them in another way. If you own a small business, cut them a check, write it off at the end of the year, do things like that, because they're kind of, putting their hearts into, every day that they're training and not making a whole lot of money doing it. So, if you want to support them, it'll go a long way.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you again for taking the time out of your night to chat with us. It was a lot of fun. And for everybody listening, we'll see you all in the next one.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
See ya.